Well, more and more, I think it is the case where the numbers that I'm seeing is that more folks are going online to disparate sources of information and leaving the mainstream media alone. You look at the circulation rates, you look at the stock prices of the leading dailies that are still left. They're all hemorrhaging big money. You look at the big three networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC, they're losing subscribers faster than you shake a stick at.
Right.
And you see the online. I mean, I grew up doing computers. I remember my first computer in high school. An Olivetti, I'm really dating myself here, but an Olivetti 101 programmable calculator. Then to a digital PDP 8B, an 8-bit mini computer. My smartphone could run rings around that. But at the time, it was $100,000 back in the early 70s. This was a huge deal for a high school to have. But now it's endemic to see people walking on the streets. Even here in Washington, because I'm from rural New Hampshire, you don't walk, you have to drive. Probably same thing in your area.
Right.
The spaces are just too vast in between to take a 3-hour walk to town.
Right. Yeah, on Chick-fil-A day, I was like, well, I could go get a Chick-fil-A, but I don't feel like driving 70 miles.
Correct. But, here on the streets, it's been somewhat of a treat to see how normal people. I lived in Boston for a year, so it's been a while. They didn't have smartphones, and everybody's texting, everybody's surfing, everybody's on their phones, and the power that people can go online to get this stuff from all kinds of websites. The journalism basically only have themselves to blame. It's sort of like us in the computer marketplace. Faxes would never have existed if we had done email in the first place.
And I think you've touched on something there that needs to be built upon. But everything that we see now won't be like this. It won't be like this maybe 5 years. Everything will be mobile. We're going to see more and more focus on mobile computing, mobile apps, and everybody who has a phone has a camera, and they should be using that wherever they go. If you see something going down, even if you think it may not be important, try to get some video of it, because who knows what could happen? Who knows what you're watching? And it's important that it gets captured.
Right. It used to be that I would tell everybody who was a political activist that you need to go get one of these. And I still happen to use it. In some ways, I'm a little more old-fashioned. Single purpose, it doesn't very well.
Yes, it does.
And it works well. But you're right with the cameras. In fact, I mentioned to my wife yesterday, I need to start learning my smartphone better. But being a computer guy, I've got so much other stuff I have to worry about. It's like, I can't do that next one thing. And that's the way it goes with the actors. I want to switch topics with you, Duane. We're talking with Duane Lester, who is a Breitbart Blogger Award winner. And you were talking a little bit before. You come from Missouri. Mm-hmm. What are some of the topics that you as a blogger are seeing out there that's catching the people's attention on your blogs? What's the rising trend that you see?
Well, we see a lot of focus on almost the lack of that's not the right word. The lack of effort to even hide these scandals that are out there. In the Obama administration, that gets people really fired up when you see something like Fast and Furious, which is just a blatant abuse of power by the ATF, and the Obama administration is just covering it up. It's so out there that it's a cover-up, and they don't even care. They're not even shy about it. They're just like, executive privilege, that's fine. And you see something like this report that comes out last week that says these 5 ATF officials were involved, and the Justice Department essentially says, that's so 2011. We've moved on from that. When you see the abuses of power that are taking place by this administration, and they don't even care that the people know it, that gets people fired up. I mean, they don't like being taken for granted. They don't like being abused. And if you show them how that's happening, you'll get the hackles up on them real quick.
Is it really something that is a big story? Because up in New Hampshire, where we're from, we're sort of in that forgotten corner of the country until the leaves start turning color, and then we come back and or when the presidential candidates start flowing through all the time. But is it people in Missouri start to think, why is it that the liberal, and we're looking all, I'm not sure whether you can pick this up, but next door they're having a big rally. They are, so we here in the studio can see a little bit. Honoring the veterans, it's a World War II veteran.
Right, World War II and Vietnam. Yesterday at the rally.
He's there, and I think it's a wonderful thing to be able to do.
Ladies and gentlemen, don't be alarmed.
So, anyways, do people in Missouri think they're being taken for granted or even denigrated by your quintessential flyover country?
Well, here's the thing about Missouri.
Are there values? Do they feel that they're being disrespected or even ignored?
No, I think Missouri is awesome. Let me just say that. When I lived in Missouri, I used to work in Nebraska and I went to church in Iowa. So,
oh, wow.
I used to tell my Nebraska friends, I'd say to them, they'd always ask me, what's the gas price over in Missouri right now? And I'd just look up and say, lower than yours. Because we didn't have the taxes that Nebraska has on fuel. And, we'd go up to Iowa, and we have better homeschooling laws in Missouri than Iowa has. And Missouri was the first state, I don't know if you remember this or not, Missouri was the first state to essentially give the middle finger to Obamacare. And they said, you're not doing individual mandates in our state. We had that vote overwhelmingly. There's like 68% of Missourians says no to the individual mandate. No, and we've set up passed legislation that says no exchanges.
New Hampshire has done the same.
I love Missouri because we essentially say, just leave us alone. Let us be free, and let us do what we can do. As long as we're not hurting anyone, you have no business messing with us.
One of the things that I did when I came in, I was here Wednesday when everybody started to come in, and Thursday, I asked two questions, and it's already up on GraniteGrok. What is your version of the American dream? And contrast that with the Obama administration's version of the American dream. And most people said exactly what you just did. Leave us alone.
Right.
And why is it that progressives, you think, and I've got my own ideas, but why do you think it is that progressives just can't fight that urge to do something to somebody else?
Well, there's this. You have to understand their idea of incrementalism. There is an end game to them, and when you look at what Marx laid out and what Engels laid out, that's the end game. That's this classless society is where they want to go, but they can't get there. That's too big a jump to go right now. So they have to take little baby steps that eventually get more and more people dependent on the federal government. And so that's why we see increases in food stamps and other things like that, because there is that end game. And that's one thing a lot of conservatives haven't understood. And that's why we get these compromises in the House of Representatives and in the Senate, because they say, well, this isn't that bad. Look at what we got. Well, a compromise with a progressive or a liberal usually consists of, you Republicans do this now, and we'll do this later. And that later never happens. And so while we get this compromise, that compromise just moves it forward. And that was best expressed in that interview with Barney Frank way back when we first started this healthcare debate. They asked him, why don't you just go for single payer now? And he said, because it wouldn't pass. Getting the individual mandate, it wasn't even that, getting that passed at that time was the best way to get to single payer. And they understood that. Even Jan Schakowsky understood that this wasn't about providing health care. This was about bankrupting the health insurance companies. Because the more you move down that road, the less able employers are going to be able to provide insurance for their employees because it'll just get too expensive. And as they move away from doing that, then you'll have to go get it on your own. It's too expensive for you as an individual because the government has set up mandates that insurance companies must follow in each individual state. And so the health insurance cost is too much for an individual to bear. So then they have to turn to the exchange where the price will be lower. And then once more and more people are turning the exchanges, the government can say, well, you're already going through us anyway. Why don't you just let us provide it for you?
GrokTV.